Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1, and we're back, and we have a very special guest today, Mr. Glenn Sanford, the founder of EXP Realty. So, Glenn, thank you very much for meeting with us.
Thanks, Tim. Glad to be here.
And if there's a strange echo, it's because we are in a very different space than when Julie and I normally do the podcast. We are on Glenn's. Is it okay to call this a yacht, or do we call it a big boat? Which is the way? I'm not really sure.
Well, I guess it's 72 feet long, so it's a yacht.
Yeah. What's the cutoff between boat and yacht?
Supposedly around 35, 40 feet is it becomes yacht length or something like that. But it definitely, when you get into this range, you're definitely a yacht. So there's no question once you get into like the 70-foot range.
Yeah, I can see why you love this thing. It's amazing. It's just beautiful. This is one of those experiences that I can imagine being out on the ocean and just never wanting to come home.
Yep, and when we get Elon Musk's Starlink,
right,
then we'll actually be able to do that. So we need high-speed internet to be able to, work from anywhere when you're out on the water.
Podcast listeners know that we bounce around, but you just touched on something that's a recurring theme on the show, and we're seeing this now that Julie and I are driving around the country. You go to these little forgotten about towns, and you're seeing the real estate market going crazy. You see people from the 2-3 hours away that formerly lived in big cities moving to these little forgotten about hamlets because of the availability of the connectivity, but also because the changed expectations of working remotely.
Yeah, well, and of course that's been going on for quite a while. I mean, ever since we became more of an information-based economy, I think the ability to work from anywhere becomes much more of a reality. And so, I saw that in actually even pre-2000, I was an internet guy. I actually grew up a lot, about 20 miles from where we're sitting right now, up across the Canadian border.
Could you put that just a little bit higher? We're using very low tech equipment, and I want you guys to
this, and I'm going to actually hold it like a microphone.
Yeah, that's what I do too.
Okay, but I've always loved to be able to go to a big city. But I don't like to live and work in a big city other than occasionally.
Well, it's fascinating. That's definitely what seems to be the world is following your model, I think, on how to live and work. And this is just an exceptionally beautiful part of the country. We haven't been up here for 20 years. So beautiful. Just amazing.
Yeah, no, we're right. So for those listening, we're right up on the Canadian border, right in Blaine, Washington. And the backdrop is Mount Baker. So we've got, a ski slopes in the background. Got the Vancouver Mountains are in the backdrop this direction. The Olympics were there back in 2008-ish, I think it was. San Juan Islands, we're sitting in a marina and we can boat out in the San Juan Islands. And when Canada fully opens up, we'll be able to boat up into the Canadian Gulf Islands. So that's kind of what we're really excited about this part of the world. It's got so much accessibility to natural activities.
I think there's a Formula One race too over in Vancouver, if I remember correctly.
Well, I think there is. I've seen it once. At least I've seen the not in person, but I saw them set up like rails.
That
and
must
stuff.
be where it is. Yeah. Well, so we're going to jump to questions. We've got, and we're going to, we may get to all these. We might get just to 3 of them and might find something we can drill down on, and it's fun. So we'll see how this goes. So Julie and I wrote down some business questions, and a few of these questions are the types of questions that we wrote down because they're the types of questions that agents are asking. You get these too, and others I think will be a lot more interesting, I think, for the listeners to listen to because they're more personal in nature. You good to go?
I'm good to go.
Okay. I think he's moving a satellite right now with his phone, listeners. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. He's talking to
I had somebody, I'm going to tell him I'm doing a podcast. So I'm going to just message somebody that I was supposed to talk to, and I forgot to message him. So anyway, we're good to go.
You know, it's kind of funny. We're sitting here where we are presently, and Julie and I are realizing that this is about, as other than Alaska, this is about as far away from home as we could be. This or Hawaii, you know, considering we live in Puerto Rico. All right, ready?
Yeah.
All right, good. So, easy questions to start with, and we'll get into some more interesting ones, I think. Well, these are interesting too, but what are you working on now that most inspires you, either business or personal?
Well, the person I was just actually messaging it was actually Glenn Stearns from Kind Lending. So we're just in the process of actually setting up Success Lending. So I'm actually pretty excited about that because it brings together two Glens. I mean, both of us named Glenn, but somebody who's been an innovator in the mortgage space, and then sort of trying to come up with some unique innovations by thinking out of the box about what we're going to do in the lending space. So I'm really excited about that. That looks like the Success Magazine acquisition last year. It's really opened up a lot of interesting opportunities between co-working, coaching. We've got Success Experts, which is a pretty unique platform that we launched fairly quickly because of the some stuff that took place because of Dave Ramsey sort of cutting off EXP agents from his platform. So we had a number of agents that needed leads to keep their business going because they were more about getting those inbound referrals, weren't really concerned about paying referrals. So just a lot of things we're working on. I mean, it's just there's other stuff I can't talk about yet because we haven't talked about it publicly yet. But those are some things that we've definitely talked about that I'm pretty excited about.
The mortgage thing's going to be huge. There's no doubt. And he's an ideal partner. He built a big mortgage company and sold it, right?
He did, yeah. So Glenn Stearns, anybody has a chance to watch the first season of Undercover Billionaire. He was on the first season, but it was pretty unique guy in that he had built from the 80s the fifth largest mortgage company in the United States. And then, unfortunately, he ended up getting cancer. And during that time, he sold the business to Blackstone, I think it was. And that was because he didn't know exactly what was going on with his health, wanted to prep, and he was able to recover from the cancer. His non-compete ran out, and he's like, man, I want to get back in the mortgage game. So in the Undercover Billionaire was interesting. One of the talked about Kind Lending, and he and Mindy Stearns were on there, and Debbie and I had we're watched the whole season. We're like going, man, would love to be in business with this guy because he just was such an endearing persona. And then got a chance to meet him because on the second season was Grant Cardone, who obviously we've got a business relationship now with Grant, and Grant put me beside Glenn Stearns in his house. We started chatting, and now we got Success Lending.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You know, the Success acquisition was something that surprised a lot of people because it seemed like, well, how does a real estate company buy? But then it was just a matter of weeks that you started to roll out, and people started to see what you were planning on doing with that brand. And then when you put it in, when you think about it from a real estate agent's perspective, it's all of a sudden we have Success Lending. We're going to have, I guess there's going to be a luxury division for EXP that's going to be built under Success. I don't know if that's still in the works, but yeah.
Yeah, we're working on, we're trying different stuff out because we're really thinking about this whole idea of brand expansion. And we think about a brand. Success is a 125-year-old brand. It's been around. And it's had everybody from Napoleon Hill to Og Mandino to more recently Mel Robbins. A couple issues ago we had Jamie Kern Lima. She founded a company and sold it to, I think it was L'Oreal, for over $1 billion. She's like 40 years old. And but it's all these people who've been super successful in life and are willing to give back and help other people be more successful. It's not so much about the recognition, even though there's always some sort of monetary reward that's sort of attached to putting yourself out there in that sort of way, but it's really about how do I help other people think the right way, act the right way, do the right things to sort of take their life, their business to the next level.
Well, makes perfect sense. But from an agent broker's perspective, from a real estate agent, I would imagine they didn't, the opportunity to be associated with a brand that's over 100 years old, that has so much incredible historical tie-ins. It's not like just it's so beyond the normal things that a big real estate company would ever do. It was thinking so far out of the box that I think initially people were going like, what? And then, like I said, just a couple weeks later, they're starting to see where your mind was going with all of it, and it's like, wow, this is amazing, because you could do so many little spin-offs, associations, and that's such a well-known. I mean, you go to any magazine stand where there's a magazine stand, right?
Right.
And there's Success Magazine, and it's been there forever. That's incredible.
Yeah, there's been some breaks in the history of the magazine where it wasn't on the stands. But, it's been, I think the previous owner kind of resurrected it in 2008. Darren Hardy was really big with the magazine for a number of years. And you talk to real estate agents all the time. I'm talking to different real estate agents from all kinds of different brands, not just EXP. And they'll say, oh, yeah, I would get the magazine. I'd take the CD and I'd put it in my CD player and I'd listen to it while I was out, showing properties, because it just helped reinforce the principles of success, and as a result, agents were more successful. And so, really wanting to bring that forward into, more into the real estate ecosystem of EXP, so that we can just help people think the right way, do the right things, and get the results that just a change in the way you think and operate can make.
Yeah, and I love it. I mean, I love the guy, who you have. Don's great. We've known Don since forever. So it's great. So let's move on. So what is the biggest challenge or threat? We have, mostly agents listening. So what's the biggest challenge or threat to the real estate market that nobody's talking about?
Yeah, well, I think when you say that nobody's talking about, I think the stuff that everybody's talking about, iBuyers it's one of those ones that is probably not as big a service to the consumer community, but ultimately is part of this attempt by big money to interrupt the normal transactions of real estate. So I think there's a lot of money that's being thrown at this thing. Now, it serves other interests. If you think about Zillow specifically, whether they buy a home or not, they're generating a ton of leads that they're just going back and selling to agents. So it's a great sort of trap for leads. But I think there's other companies that really want to, change fundamentally what it means to be a real estate agent and representing a buyer. Like, buyer representation, in my opinion, is probably the big thing is really being threatened right now. And you look at the sort of the lawsuits, and even the Justice Department right now is sort of re-looking at some of the stuff that they did with NAR and some different folks, and I know that there's some big money out there that doesn't understand why cooperative real estate actually benefits the consumer, and they just simply go, well, if they charge 2.5% in the UK, then consumers shouldn't be paying whatever they pay here in the U.S. Let's just say it's 5.25% or 5.5%, whatever the number is, and they just mentally can't get their head around it. But if you talk to a consumer that's bought real estate in the UK versus the U.S., they love the way the business operates in the U.S. because you get to work with an agent that represents you. In the UK, none of those agents are representing your interests. You're only working with somebody who represents the interests of a seller, and you're only working with various sellers' agents, and they're there to ultimately do what the seller wants.
It's a buying a car experience, basically, versus what we have here in the United States. It's what it is in virtually all the rest of the country, or all the rest of the world except the United States and Canada. People don't know that, too, that you travel a little bit, you'll realize that there's no, like Glenn just said, there's no real co-op anyplace else in the world. But, it's funny. Brad Inman, I remember when Inman News started. I was the tech company he started before Inman News. I don't remember. There was one. It was a spinoff from Microsoft.
He did Book at one time. He did HomeGain at one time.
It was HomeGain I'm thinking of. Mm-hmm. So, and then he started Inman. And I remember he was talking about this big word back in the 90s that scared everyone, disintermediation, right? So the idea that there's going to be no need for realtors, or the industry, or the consumers are going to evolve out of not wanting to be represented in a transaction. Is that war already fought and essentially lost on behalf of the tech companies? In other words, haven't the tech companies already tried to disintermediate agents, and it's just not going to work because consumers ultimately want to use a realtor?
Yeah, well, there was certainly an attempt to make a real estate professional more akin to well, I think they were looking at like the hotel industry and the travel industry and how it had totally changed because of the web. And it's one thing when you're talking about getting a seat in coach versus buying a house. You don't need a lot of data. You just need to know that you're going from Seattle to Miami and there's a plane that's going that direction, and you hope that you can get something that's not a middle seat. And that's pretty much the whole sum of the whole exercise. I mean, if you don't get the middle seat, yeah, you might be stuck by the bathroom, which might be a little stinkier, but the middle seat's the one that you want to avoid. Otherwise, the whole plane is pretty much the same. You get an aisle, you get a window, And so real estate's not that way. Real estate, every house is different. You sit there right now. We're looking at some properties just because we've got some interest in some different properties. There's a lot of work that goes into trying to find the property. One, what does it have the right room configuration? That's one thing. But what does it feel like? What's the neighborhood feel like? What are the what does this community stand for? And a tech company can't actually represent any of that. And that's why I think at the end of the day, real estate agents will be just as important 10 years from now as they are today, just as they were 10 years ago. And so for real estate agents, I think their business is solid. Now, will a percentage of the business go a different direction? We'll pick iBuyer. For sure. There's always been, we'll call them cash for keys, we buy ugly houses, some sort of institutional buyer that will buy pretty much anything and give you a price for it and give you instant cash for keys. But most people want to maybe maximize the value of their home and maybe ultimately the amount difference. And I did some math on Zillow's iBuyer offering. I figure it costs a consumer about 13%. I think it was 13% was the number that came out versus about 6% for an agent. If you sort of just do the delta between those two numbers, 7% of the value of the home can make a huge difference when you think about leverage over time. Let's just say it's your first home and maybe you're talking about $60,000, $50,000, $40,000, maybe only $10,000. So say it's $10,000. Well, that $10,000, you think about going through 2 or 3 houses and you lose money each time, you'd be looking at something like akin to $400,000 or $500,000 when when it's time to retire difference. And that could make a huge difference. So, I think that the iBuyer is a disingenuous way to say that they're looking out for consumers and a way more to make money.
It's a convenience fee. That's what we call it. I mean, that's what consumers are sometimes obviously willing to pay. But you said it right. I mean, they've always been willing to do that. We buy ugly houses. Those, they're always been wholesale buyers forever. It's not a new idea, which is kind of funny too, because iBuyer sounds so much more sexy than we buy ugly houses to some people, I suppose. But there always have been people in that business, and always will be people in that business. It's kind of interesting too, is when there's a lot of equity in properties and there's a lot of demand for this market, when the market goes the opposite direction and people's equity position shrinks, those iBuyers, where's the business model? It doesn't really exist. But that's not our reality now for sure.
Right.
But I will say though, the iBuyer that we offer at EXP is so exceptional in that an agent, we talk about this on the show all the time. If you don't have, as an agent, an iBuyer option in your toolbox when you're going to talk to a seller and you are competing against one of the Open Door Zillows, you're on your heels. So having EXP offer an iBuyer, what a brilliant move.
Yeah. So we launched Express Offers. It's going to be getting close to about 2 years ago when we launched it, or at least we conceptualized of it initially, and we said, why are we going to take the balance sheet risk? We're a capital light company, meaning that we don't put a lot of capital at risk in anything. So we don't have a lot of bricks and mortar, and so we're really capital light. But we also looked at the fact that there's a lot of people who want to buy homes in local communities for whatever reason. Maybe they want to buy them for their rental pools. Maybe they do want to buy to fix and flip, whatever reason they wanted to do that. We thought if we could create a marketplace of those types of buyers and then allow consumers to tap into that marketplace and see 3 or 4 potential bids on their same property, if it fits different buy boxes, then that would benefit a consumer. And then the agent comes in and says, okay, here's your 3 or 4 offers. By the way, we can get an offer from Open Door and Zillow Offers or what have you. But at the end of the day, if it's a fully marketed listing, here's what the difference is in net. And the net difference can be significant.
You know, you were mentioning the loss of that they're taking by essentially wholesaling their houses every time. That's not even taking necessarily, or maybe you did in your analysis, taking into consideration the loss of the, not really compounding, but the interest they would have made on that equity had they kept it in the property with the appreciation of the property or inflation, right?
Right.
So it's mind-boggling, really.
Yep.
It truly is. All right, so what happens to EXP? I get this one occasionally. I love this question personally because it's so fun to answer. But what happens to EXP in a recession?
Yeah, so we were actually built and designed specifically to be able to weather any market. And we launched in 2009, bottom of the housing market. We one of the phrases that I'd used earlier in the year is April 2009. Some of the agents said, "When do we get our offices back?" and I said, "We don't know how long the market's going to suck, so we need to be able to develop a defensible business model that's not dependent on bricks and mortar." And we need to be able to be profitable in good times and bad times. And the only way we could do that is by eliminating the single biggest cost to residential real estate, brokerage, which is the physical office, which then is also followed closely by this redundant staffing costs that exist in every office in the country. So you've got a receptionist or a director of first impression, and you got the bookkeeper or the MCA or whatever, nomenclature. But you've got 4 or 5 people that are in every single office in the U.S. That's decent size. 2-person office, maybe they don't have anybody, but if they're a decent size, they've got 4 or 5 people that man that office, which is just a requirement in order to be able to run effectively. And by running entirely virtual, we're able to reduce our staffing footprint and still provide a higher level of service in a lot of cases than most of our bricks and mortar counterparts, by leveraging the best in the business from all over the country rather than the best person in the office. So when you have a tech challenge and you're in one of these other offices, they've got some tech kid or in the back that can do some tech stuff, but they're not that good. Whereas we've got really great people because we've got the best tech people in the country that will help work on your computer. We'll remote in, we'll come in, we'll send you down to the shop, whatever. We'll do the things that are necessary to get you back up in ways that a local office, where they'll go, "Hey, we just sell real estate. If you need to get your computer fixed, you need to go to Best Buy." That would be their answer. So we're able to provide a higher level of support. And then with all that means that if there's a recession, we can actually reduce all of our costs because they're all variable costs. And if you're a business owner, a brokerage owner, I'll use broker owner listening to this, the biggest, we talk about fixed costs, that's your bricks and mortar costs. And you got your insurance, and then you got, there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 different fixed costs. Then in a recession, guess what? You still have to pay those.
Yeah, those kill you.
Yeah, and that's why so many people went out of business in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2007 even. And in the next recession, unfortunately, there'll be a lot of people who will have to consolidate and figure out how to get out from underneath those nuts, because you're typically signing 3 to 5 year leases. And in a recession, we should actually pick up market share, because if you're an agent wondering, where do I go next? Do you want to go somewhere that might go out of business in the next recession, or do you want to go with a company that's actually built to weather any marketplace?
I agree completely, because really at the end of the day, most agents, brokers and sometimes teams won't make decisions to move over when the cash is flowing, right? When money's flowing, deals happening, everyone's happy, getting your awards and your plaques, it's when that slows down. And usually it takes about 90 days, 3 slow months in a row, and then people start having to keep the lights on, coming out of their own pockets, using their own savings, and that's written. I suspect there will be a really unprecedented increase in the number of people joining EXP. We're already seeing it. I mean, the net growth for your company is extraordinary every single month. Glenn, do you know if there's ever been a company that's grown in net agent count per month this fast?
According to Real Trends, no. Like Real Trends just came out with a stat that EXP Realty is the fastest growing, organically growing real estate company over the last 5 years of any company they've ever studied in the industry. And if you think about the fact that we're basically coming up on close to 60,000 agents today, so we're 59,000 and change. And you just think about in 11 and a half, 12 years, we went from basically 0 to 60,000 agents. Nobody's grown that fast. I mean, Keller didn't even. I think they started in '84, and I think by '94 they were probably still only 1,000 agents or so. So and Remax, I don't know what it did, but it grew fast, but it also was in the 70s and 80s. It's a different marketplace, but historically nobody's grown as fast as we have.
You're actually bringing up an interesting. So a lot of these big brands, before it was, you could argue Century 21 was one of them before our time, but then Remax and then Keller Williams and all these other, they seem to have you know what? I'm not going to jump on the questions. It's at the top of the sheet of the next page, so I'm going to use those questions because you'll like it.
Okay.
It's about where EXP is on its growth cycle as far as the product goes. All right, this was a Julie question, but I liked it. Outside of developing EXP, what are you irrationally passionate about?
Well, I'm boating. I mean, you're sitting on.
I
the
can
boat.
see that.
Yeah. So this is something I really enjoy doing. But I'm a long distance runner. Still do a fair bit. I ran my first true half marathon 3-4 weeks ago, I think, something like that. So I like to run half marathons. And 2015, I think I did 6 of them, and then I think I did 4 in 2016, and then I dealt with some issues that took me out of my running game in a significant way for a few years, but then got a few going in 2019 again. So big runner, enjoy doing that, enjoy boating, do a little bit of, I'll probably get back into grappling again. I did judo for 27 years, did Brazilian jiu-jitsu for 8 years.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah. So I enjoy, martial, we'll just say grappling arts is my thing. And then I enjoy growing businesses. Like I keep on going to Jeff Whiteside. So Jeff's our CFO and Chief Collaboration Officer. And I go, okay, I'm going to start relaxing a bit. He says, go for it. We got it. And I it's like every day I was like, I'm always working on more stuff EXP. So I'm going, well, I should take more vacations. I'm like, but I enjoy working on work too much.
That's interesting, though. I mentioned that we live in Dorado, and I've had that very conversation with a lot of the very successful people that we run across. And I asked them, so, are you going to retire? And they're usually in their late 50s, early 60s, I would say, most of the ones that I'm seeking advice from, and they never want to say, they always say, well, no, I take some, when I'm vacationing, it'll be for a month and it'll be for August and I go to Italy with my boat or whatever. But for the most part, they love what they're doing. That's where they get their fulfillment from. But not only that, they see the impact of all the people's lives. I mean, Julie and I talked about you today on the podcast. And, the very fact that you've been so impactful on so many agents' lives, but not just that, their families and the generations that come after that. Do you intellectualize that? Do you think about that?
Only when I see like an in-person event.
Yeah, I bet.
Because, as you can tell, I live pretty remote compared to where the agents, and you think about what does 60,000 agents mean. And I mean there's football stadiums that won't hold 60,000 people.
Yeah.
And those are big stadiums even in themselves. So I'll go there and I'll go, that's when it kind of overwhelms me a bit to think about what that actually represents. And but fortunately I don't see 60,000 agents every day, so I'm able to just put my head down and just work on the business.
So along those lines, this is actually, you might want to listen to today's podcast because we ended up talking about you a lot. It was all good stuff. But we were talking about the fact that previous leaders of companies, but specifically of real estate companies, have always been these big braggadocious, sort of look at me, want to be the center, almost like they want to live their life, their rock star dreams out on stage, not that they're head of some big brokerage. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you're not. And when you think of EXP, you think of EXP Realty and Glenn Sanford, but you don't seem to have an ego conflict with, I don't know how to express it, but you understand what I'm saying? You don't seem to have this insatiable desire to be the center of everything, which is an admirable quality from our perspective and incredibly rare, especially as someone in your position.
Yeah, I think it's just, I've always been sort of a business nerd, and so I just enjoyed building businesses rather than, and it's never, well, I don't want to say it's never been about me, but I've never named something. Well, when I was a kid, my first company was called Sanware Software, so SAN for Sanford. And where was for sort of software kind of a thing. And I was 15 years old. So that was my first business that I quote unquote incorporated and had business cards and stuff for. But everything else I've always thought about the concept and the idea, and then wanting to encapsulate in a way that I wasn't needed at the end of the day. If you have a business, and this is where I'll coach agents, and there's no one right way or wrong way. Everybody's got a different perspective. But I personally am not a big fan of people who want to build big businesses naming it after themselves, because I think it then limits their ability to actually scale when they want to step back. And so I just built that in sort of day one. EXP Realty has nothing to do with me other than I'm working on the founder of the company. But at the end of the day, the business, I want it to outlast me. And so I'm always working on how can I not be the center of attention. So that's what I really actually work on, is how do I not have to be the one out front? And it's something I had to do for a while, because it was ideas that I had originally developed, and quite frankly couldn't pay people quite the type of people that I would need to be on this with me to be able to take the reins in the early days. So I had to be the lead for 5-6 years, 7 years maybe. And now you've got so many great leaders. And I always thought about as well, was I wanted to be involved in a company, if I was an agent, where I wasn't building it somebody else's name. So I was with Keller Williams at one point, and of course there's other companies been named after a number of other people, Coldwell Banker and others. And I've always sort of had an aversion to the name of the person being the name on the shingle. If it wasn't me, and I didn't want my name on the shingle either. And so for me, it's always been about how do I play a background role. I refer to myself as the highest paid assistant in real estate, because I don't really think about myself as telling people what to do, but I want to be able to get in there, get my hands dirty, help somebody with a project, step back and allow them to sort of enjoy the success of whatever that is as it continues to grow.
When did you, with EXP, we've been solicited for 6 years prior to joining, and it was just, for us, it was just not the right time. It didn't make sense. We were worried that it was going to have a bad effect on our coaching business. We just had all these things we hadn't thought through. And then a couple of things happened with regards to talking to different people, and we realized that we weren't thinking clearly and the rest of it. And that was in late 2018, middle 2018. But when was it where you realized the company had taken a real definite turn to where it is now? Like, was there a time, was there like a holy tamale, we went from 1,000 agents to 2,500 agents, or was there any epiphany like that?
Yeah, there were definitely different inflection points. When we became a public company that in 2013, that was an important piece, because we knew that as part of the ingredient set, we believed that equity was going to be a game changer. And then we introduced our agent equity program in late 2014, and that's what quite frankly attracted Gene Frederick. And then and Gene came in, and that guy was just a monster.
He's the one that we talked to that convinced us.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
So it was when we started to attract people like Gene. Now, Brian Colhane, he was former president of EXP, and he was part of the founding group of agents that helped us launch the company in the original days. But I said, the person that we're building this for hasn't shown up yet, but when they show up, this company's going to take off. And for us, I think that was when Gene Frederick joined us, and I just said, we're building it for. I know the persona, because if I was not building EXP, I would have been looking for EXP, and so I was building the company I really wanted to be a part of, and I figured if we could find somebody who was looking for us, that we'd start to really take off. And I think that first real big win was Gene.
Looking for EXP, but not necessarily knowing that they're looking for EXP, but you understood the problems that they have, and you could identify their problems, and you were the solution, even without them necessarily knowing that they were looking for you. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the miracle of this thing. I mean, that's the brilliance of, well, actually, I keep on wanting to jump forward on my questions. Now, if I'm remembering this wrong, feel free to tell me I'm remembering this wrong. But I think I remember watching a video where you were being interviewed. It was a number of years ago, where you said there's two things agents don't do: pay taxes and save money. Was that you?
I did say that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember that was one of the things that Julie and I, because we been in the coaching business forever, and I always, when agents would come to us and ask which brokerage they should join prior to EXP, we'd say, they're all basically the same.
Mm-hmm.
So we stayed broker agnostic until we understood what you had created. And that very statement was so true. And it's true not just with beginning agents or middling agents. It's true with top producers as well. I mean, when we've coached all these guys in different spectrums of income and revenue and success, and they very rarely have been able to accumulate any meaningful net worth for a whole bunch of reasons. Not all of them their own fault, truthfully. I mean, commissions, as you talked about, on the buyer agent side of the transaction has gone down. You know, the business model has changed. They don't adapt fast enough. Whatever, right? The market changes. And a lot of these people end up, and when did you get your license?
2002.
Okay, so Howard Brinton was barely, Julie and I were Howard Brinton stars from the 90s.
Right.
And Howard Brinton's business model was to interview what he perceived to be the top agents in the United States and Canada. And I remember when Julie and I got to know a lot of those top agents, you know, Penny McLaughlin doesn't live too far from here, and others. We get to know them, and to a person, big lifestyle, big personalities, big whatever, but not a couple bad seasons and they were going to be,
out of business.
Yeah, out of business. And Julie and I, that's how we learned in our formidable years, fortunately, that following these big team models aren't necessarily going to get you to a point of having, essentially being financially independent. My point being is that when you were in a similar situation, if I'm correct, when you started EXP, can you talk about that?
Well, I fortunately, before EXP and before I got into real estate, I'd been around a lot of business people. My dad had started a successful business and then ultimately lost it all. But I learned some formative lessons there. But I had some really good mentors in business. And what I realized is when I got my license in the business was that, well, one of the very first things I did is I put myself on salary. So I became an agent on somebody else's team, even though I did all the lead generation. He would just guarantee me a little bit of a salary. So I did my lead generation and I went and sold. And then I gave him 30% on top of that. And I gave the office 30 or 40%. So anyway, I didn't have a lot of income coming in, but he guaranteed me $3,000 a month. So that's where I started. But within a very, very short period of time, I put myself on salary.
Hold on. Don't you think it's funny what you just said? How old were you?
35.
Okay, so you're in your mid-50s now. But don't you think that's miraculous? You were like $3,000 a month, sign me up, and it wasn't that long ago, Glenn.
I know.
And now you're on Forbes' list of one of the wealthiest people in the world.
Yeah. It's my dad taught me a lot about equity as well.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things he taught me years ago is he pulled out a $100 bill and he pulled out a share certificate worth $100 and he showed them both to me. And he said, "Glenn, which one's worth more?" And I said, "Well, or which one would you want?" I said, "Well, give me the $100 bill." And he says, "No, that's not the right way to think about it. You want the $100 share certificate because, if you're building a company, you can actually print effectively more share certificates. You start printing $100 bills, you go to jail." So it's actually, so I learned this thing about equity and perceived value of equity and what it meant, as companies became successful, and why equity is actually a way more powerful part of the model than anything else when you think about business in general. And it comes back to this whole idea that real estate agents don't own a business. Real estate agents have a business that owns them. And meaning that if something happens to them, their business is out of business. Or their personal business, because they don't really own a business. But the broker owner, they just replace the agents and sort of just churn through them, and there's not really a care for the agent. It's more a care for how many agents do we have at the brokerage, because that's going to help them make their net, and hopefully some of them sell. And so I just recognized there's a fundamental flaw in the way real estate brokerage was set up. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to become a good agent. I was a big internet lead generator. That's why I was on the path that I was on. I was rookie of the year, ended up, but my first full year in the business, I was the number 3 in the office. So I was a great agent, but within that first year or so, I actually put myself on salary. So I think it was like $4,000 a month. That was my salary.
Gave yourself a raise. That's good though. You went from 3 to 4.
I went from 3 to 4, but the 3 was the guarantee. The 4 was my salary, but everything else I put into the business. So I was building out websites. I was hiring staff. I was doing pay-per-click. I was doing a bunch of stuff with all the extra money, and then I've given myself raises over time. But one of the things I keep on trying to convince agents to do is to put themselves on salary as opposed to pay themselves based on commission. Because once you put yourself on salary, you can actually run a P&L against your business, and you actually run your business like a business. And now you can start to think about what are the various puts and takes that you can use on your business plan to actually work on your business, not just in your business. So for me, go back to the original sort of idea. The original idea was to protect agents from themselves, meaning that left to our own devices as agents, and me included, left to my own devices as an agent, I would be broke. And I think left to most agents' devices, they would be broke, and most agents are broke. And so you have to figure out what are the various systems and processes that you need to put in place to actually have a business that you're actually building, and most agents can't get there. So I saw the opportunity of putting the infrastructure in place so an agent would have all the benefits of a business that they're building without having to go through all the brain damage of putting in all the infrastructure to have that business.
Yeah, and I remember you've experienced this, I'm sure, in abundance, all the people that were just beside themselves with the increase in the value of EXPI, and not to mention revenue share and the rest of it. And for some it is so true what you said. There is sort of a risk taker gene that seems to be insatiable in most agents, whether they're top producers or not. They almost don't like the comfort of financial security, and unless they build systems around that, sort of just accept the fact that's how they're always going to be, like you said, basically, they're probably always going to end up broke. And that is definitely, I don't know if it's outside of real estate, because my whole life's been in real estate, but it does seem to be a characteristic of most humans, actually.
Yeah, I think most people in sales, because sales generally, I mean, how many salespeople? I mean, I know there are some, but a percent. If you were to pick a percentage, what percentage of salespeople do you believe are actually good with paperwork?
Yeah, none. Matter of fact, if you're good with paperwork as a salesperson, you're almost shunned by other salespeople. It's almost like supposed to be some sort of, skill you're supposed to intentionally be bad at.
Yeah, I mean, so I was not really good with paperwork, and when I used to do my taxes, it was funny. I told one of my early accountants back, and statute of limitations long run out, but
you hope.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah, this was like 2005, so I think that's far enough back. But she asked me how I figured out my expenses. I said, well, it felt like that was what my expenses were. So that's why I wrote down my tax return. I felt like my expenses were $35,000 that year. And she goes, I kind of put in my hand. Yeah, it feels like $35,000.
In our book, we write that selling real estate, even at a very high level, won't make you rich. It's what you do with the profits from selling real estate that make you rich, which then forces the question, are you running a profitable real estate business, which most real estate agents aren't, especially in an age like this where buyer agent commissions are falling. And most, back in the 90s, when you had, Julie and I had 7 buyers agents, and back in the 90s, those buyers agents, they were prospecting. They were picking up the phone. They were doing real work. They were holding open houses. Nowadays, it's buying leads. And a lot of the agents that got licensed since the 2007, 2008, where all that stuff has become normalized, they don't realize that the original model for the team model, the margins were not what they are now, which is virtually nothing for teams. I mean, on this sojourn, right, we were driving all over the country. We keep on stopping by brokers and teams and whatnot, and I'm seeing that fixed costs, the ones that aren't EXP agents, and truthfully, it makes me nervous for them. Mm-hmm. And knowing that most of them have never sold, they've been licensed only since the real estate crash in 2009, 2010, so they've never been through a transitioning market or a buyer's market, and they build up all these fixed costs and it's become normalized. That goes back to the validity of the business model you thought of. All of them are going to be flawed. What's their alternative?
Well, yeah, I mean, bricks and mortar based business, just to use kind of from an economics perspective, in order for them to continue to attract agents, they have to improve their splits to the agents, and provide the bricks and mortar and what have you. So let's just say to compete with an EXP, they're going to have a split model that's closer to an 80-20. They're going to have a cap model that's closer to 16,000 because they're worried about agents leaving to go to EXP. And it works in an up market. Right now we're in we're in a market that, a dog with a note in his mouth can sell real estate because there's so much stuff going on. Now, I say that in jest, but there's a lot of business going on in the marketplace. But when this thing slows down, and you've given up all of your profit effectively in attracting agents, you can't raise your fees on agents when their income's going down, because they're now going to go somewhere else where they can actually retain the amount of money that they were making, and in some cases make more money on the business that they still have left in a slower market. So I do feel for bricks and mortar based brokerages. I mean, they should be trying to figure out, how do I turn my office into a co-working space? How do I get it out from being just a real estate brokerage? How do I eventually exit the bricks and mortar piece? But 50% of offices are franchises in this country, and that means that 50% of them have contractual relationships with the franchisor to have a certain amount of bricks and mortar footprint in order to actually maintain the with the franchise agreement.
The other question, I'm sure you get this too, that I get occasionally is, what would prevent an existing big competitor, pick your brand, let's not mention any names, right? Copying EXP. What would prevent some big franchise model from, that's already got well-known brand recognition saying, we're just going to do what EXP does. We see that they're sucking all the air out of the room. We're going to compete. What would prevent them from doing that?
Well, it's all the franchisees that have long-term leases on buildings because of the franchise agreement that they originally signed with the franchisor. If you've got 600 or 800 people that have franchises out there, and you've got an average of 2 or 3 or 4 years left on your leases, and then your parent company says, well, we're going to create this virtual model, and we're going to charge less, and we're going to use the name. Guess what? All the franchisees are going to cry foul, and they actually do in this country have legal rights of protecting their business in the face of a franchisor. So franchisors are fairly hooped. You think about Realty, okay, that maybe they go create an entirely new brokerage brand. Well, what happens when everyone from Coldwell Banker, Century 21, and all the other brands that Realty has, Sotheby's, says, I'm going to go to that company that has that much better financial model and still has the backing of Realty. Well, it just doesn't work. So, and so that's where I think the challenge will be, is if you're going to cannibalize your own marketplace, you're going to create so much internal strife that's probably not worth it. It's probably better to figure out ways to improve the financial model for the local broker owners. Otherwise, they're going to cry foul.
Yeah, it is the advantage in the marketplace that EXP has, just from just in the 2.5 years Julie and I have been associated with your company. The changes that have happened have just been amazing, as far as the staff and all your key people in the company and how efficiently things happen. Just to try to recreate that from ground zero, good luck.
Mm-hmm.
That it's the sort of the same reason that no one's ever going to catch up with Tesla as far as selling electric cars. They're selling electric cars, but do they have a nationwide? I mean, Julie and I are driving around, and we're coming across these dusty some of these towns, and sure enough, there's 6 Tesla charge ports that are sitting in the middle of these 3 or 4 times. It's like, that cannot be real. That has to be some sort of mirage. And sure enough, Elon had built some charge port in the middle of nowhere. Good luck catching up with that. That's what EXP basically, the advantage it has.
But I do like the Porsche Taycan.
Oh yeah.
Like that. I looked at one the other day that the Taycan
Turbo S probably.
S,
yeah. You totally should get that.
Yeah. But at the same time, I'm calculating, okay, how far can I drive it? It's only got 201 mile range. Right. If I drive to Seattle, and I got to come back, and I got to find a place to charge it, and there's some places to charge it, but it's just that. But it's a beautiful car. Yeah,
so in those dusty old times, you're going to be charging your car, and you're not going to want to leave your car. That's kind of what I'm trying to pass along.
Right.
So that's more. But that means that coexistence of electric cars and dinosaur juice cars are going to exist for generations. And don't get me started on cars. I'm a car nerd. Do you have time?
Yep, I do.
Okay, good. All right, if you had to go to someone for business or personal advice, dead or alive, who would it be? These are good questions, right?
They're great questions.
That's a Julie question.
So, well, one of my mentors, he has passed, a gentleman named Gerald Sahlberg, but he would be somebody. I read tons of Tom Peters. Like Tom Peters was my go-to in the 80s and 90s. Read tons of stuff. He wrote the book In Search of Excellence. He's got some stuff on social media and stuff. But he's certainly somebody I would love to pick the brain of, because so much of the stuff that he talks about, even back in that formative book In Search of Excellence, is stuff that I still operate from today. Stephen Denning, he's a more current author with a lot of great stuff. The Leader's Guide to Radical Management. Love to get a chance to chat with him. He's getting up there in age, but he's written so many amazing books on just the latest book I think that I read was The Age of Agile. It's really about how to have organizations sort of develop their own operating system internally in a way that isn't top down, and then how that can be leveraged to scale. And so I really get interested in that type of stuff. So those would be people I'd chat with.
Without boring people talking about management, one of the nice things about EXP is there's not a lot of silos, right? Everyone sort of co-mingles. You can talk to, Dave, the co-president of the company, and he's got his fingers in his other things. You talk to Jason, and they all seem to know what's going on. It's not like people are, this is my job, this is their job. Was that intentional?
It was, yeah. So we don't really have, we do have every organization has some sort of top-down hierarchy, but ours is pretty loose. Like, I literally, and I'd say this is pretty consistent. We don't tell a lot of people what to do. We ask people, we enroll people into ideas, we find out if they've got the time and the interest to work on different projects, but it's not so much of, I need you to do this. Now, there's some people that are like, whatever you need me to do, let me know, I'm in. But they've sort of already pre-enrolled in whatever you want them to do. And those are really great people to work with. It's taken a while to sort through the right type of management personas in the organization. But what we have figured out is that we use Net Promoter Score. You've probably heard us talk about that quite a bit. We use that as our primary metric for figuring out what to work on. And so if we're getting low scores on our Net Promoter Score in a particular area, it allows us to rally to it. But it's not so much of, we still do it a little bit. Hey, I can get so-and-so to help on that, or I can get so-and-so to work on that. But they're already sort of mentally bought into just doing whatever it takes wherever they're needed. And so we do have a very ebb and flow type of organization that can sort of move and float around and work on different things without it being as hierarchical as a lot of organizations. And
it prevents people in big organizations. It really stymies the typical problem with growing companies of people trying to silo power and essentially adding staff and the rest of it. Whereas, in your company, the way you've designed it, people all have a collaborative approach to accomplishing the goal. At least that's been our experience. It's very, very different,
right,
than a traditional brokerage at the very least.
Yeah, and I think one of the phrases I use is, if it's not broke, break it. And the reason being is that I think everything can be improved, and if you allow things to get too solid in one particular area, then that actually can create its own problems. So the idea is, let's always be fluid, let's always be breaking things, let's always be trying something new. Let's not accept that this is going to be always, or this team's always going to be running this. We want people to sort of think about the fact that they're really going to be working on different parts of the organization at different times. Sometimes they might be working on Success Magazine. Sometimes they might float over to Verbella. They might float over to international or broker jobs. People will float around and get things done, and that's just the way we've kind of designed it.
It also allows you to, you notice how different people are, doing better in this position versus that position. It gives you an idea of who you might want to, promote or build, put more energy behind. So
yeah, so I think the term "put more energy behind" is probably the way that I think about it more, because I think about the idea that there is obviously going to be promotions, because their titles mean things to people, but I think more of, who can I put energy into and know that they're going to use that in a constructive way, and that are going to be also inclusive, and that they're not doing it from a power play. It's more of an add value play.
Right. Makes total sense. I have some more good questions. Ready?
You do.
All right, good. So, ready for this one?
I think so.
This was a Tim question, and I thought actually this was kind of a funny question to ask you, but we'll see how you do. How do you know if you're thinking big enough? And what stands, and when you catch yourself not thinking big enough, what typically is standing in the way of you thinking bigger?
It's really, what I've found is there's only a certain level that you can think above where you're at any given time. So like if somebody's a brand new agent, you wouldn't think about running a worldwide real estate brokerage. So, but you could think about, potentially having an office, or potentially recruiting a few agents, or potentially this or that. So there's a certain level of, what size, what's the next iteration. Now, the other question is, will it scale? So I think like in 2009, we only had 25 agents, but we thought about the idea that, that we might get 1,000 or 2,000 agents. I mean, we were going, that'd be a pretty big win from 25 agents. And then we got into, I think about 300 agents or so. And I remember Jason Gessing and I went and visited with Stefan Swanepoel, and he was asking, where do you guys think you'll be in 2020? And Jason goes, 10,000 agents. And Stefan was like, it was not, he thought it was a very incredulous number. And we're like, well, we see how it's growing. We think it's going to get there. And of course we finished well above that in 2020. But
24,000, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, about 25,000.
Yeah, I'd say that's well above.
Well above that, yeah. So but I think every time you get to the next level, then you get to think about the next level. So there's a certain like I wouldn't be thinking about, like right now I'm not thinking about running a GE style company, like that has all these huge divisions
conglomerates
and conglomerates. But eventually, who knows? Maybe that does become my thinking, but I think it's a natural stepping stone. But I think the idea is to always be thinking bigger, always be thinking about the next iteration, and recognize, for me personally, I find that every 6 months to a year, maybe a year and a half, there'll be like this, oh, that might work. And then I'll put some energy behind it, and we'll see if it starts to work or it gets some traction. But the core of the business, like fortunately, knock on wood, the core of the business is super solid. I mean, it's like the value prop, we've really dialed it in. We're always working on it, but at the same time, it's what's powering all these other innovative ideas that might take us to the next level.
I have a question here, but I'm going to let you read it first, and you tell me whether or not you want me to ask it. It's this one right here.
Okay.
If you don't want me to ask it, I won't ask it.
Well, you can ask. Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
All right. I just wasn't sure. All right. So when you became a billionaire, and again, I think your story is a uniquely American story, but it's really something that's personally, it inspires the hell out of me, truthfully.
Right.
Especially considering, like you just said, something funny. In 2009, there were 25 agents, right? And now there's like 60,000.
Right.
And I can't imagine the EXP growth is going to continue because the value proposition and the business model and the people, just the whole thing. And if the times get rough, God forbid, people always have hardship and hard times and the rest of it. But that's even, that's good for EXP ultimately. Again, hope it doesn't happen for the human hardship and whatnot. But you became a billionaire, not inside what, 14 years effectively. Mm-hmm. What the hell?
Yeah, well, I mean, so keep in mind that there's two ways to think about it. One, it's on paper, so it's not like, so there's a few things that I would have to do to actually truly have $1 billion. One, I'd have to sell all my shares, and if I did that, then I would lose the ability to help direct the company. So, a lot of people will sort of go, they'll see a number, and what it does is it represents sort of the value of the asset that I've built over time. But, what can I do with the asset? It's still fairly limited. So I live a pretty modest lifestyle compared to my billionaire status. But when I hit that number, I think it was like, well, I got a lot of people reached out to me because they knew what the number was. I think it was when the stock went over like $43.50 last year, and that was the magic number. And then it went through that. It's like, and it's like
It was like 150 before the split, wasn't it?
it was it did get up there, but it's before the split. So it made a run up to like $90 post split. So, but anyway, it was when it went through that, it was like it's a big number. The number that really blew me away was when my net worth on paper went over 100 million. So that was in 2016, I think it was. And I was like, this is not like, I'm going, that's like not a normal number. Like it's like 100 million is like, there's really nothing you can't do with 100 million. So to some extent, the $1 billion number was actually less emotionally impacting to me than the 100 million number. Because the 100 million number, I mean, I don't know who it wouldn't represent, but I think it represents a total freedom number. Like if somebody's got $100 million, there's no way they ever have to work again if they choose not to work.
Well, but I'm going to ask you this question again because I am genuinely curious. There's in the world, how many billionaires are there, on paper or otherwise, Glenn?
Well, yeah, I think Forbes has like
400.
2,000.
Oh, was it really 2,000? Wow.
Yeah, I think that's like I was like 1750 on the list or something like that.
So getting back to the inspirational aspect of this, listeners, I hope you're putting these pieces together. Glenn sold real estate. Glenn had real estate teams. Glenn's been up and down the, real estate success mountain. He comes up with this inspiring idea during a time of strife. Am I categorizing this correctly?
Yeah.
And that makes him a billionaire. If that's not something that's going to be forever inspirational for generations, I don't know what the hell will be, truthfully. I mean, it's amazing. And you're not doing, and there's humility. There's a sense of, there's no this grand, you're not, what, in the past 2 weeks, we've had 2 billionaires decide to take themselves to space. I mean, good for them, right? It's pretty awesome. But
it takes 100 billion to get there.
Is that really? Yeah, it does seem like that's. You know what? I'm going to build a rocket ship. What the hell else am I going to do with my money? Right? Yeah. I know it's just fun. Anyway, I think it's cool. So I appreciate that. Julie wrote this question down. So when you did become a billionaire, did you call anyone to share it? Did you buy yourself any presents? Did you do anything to really kind of like, was there anything that you could say, okay, $43 a share, I'm a billionaire. People called you, I'm sure, but did you at least take yourself out and get like a Big Mac or something?
Yeah. So last year was a weird year with COVID. So, so I don't even know you could get to McDonald's. I mean, I'm just saying. So I'm not sure exactly what we were doing. I think it was October, November last year. Was the time frame, but didn't do a whole bunch. I think we were just hanging around here, and
not so bad.
Yeah, not a bad spot. In October it starts to rain, so just so you know, it's not always this nice.
It's so beautiful here. The temperature is like the only other climate I've ever been where it's this nice is like, the French Riviera, Southern California, now here. It's just endless. Well, you're going to tell me it's not endless days, but endless days of 70 degrees, no humidity, and no clouds. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, July, August, and early September. Basically you get 2.5 months. This is your weather pattern. And
a huge amount of daylight. The sun doesn't set here till like 9:30.
Yep. Yeah. So, but back to your previous question, I called my dad. So of course, called him.
Do you mind sharing that story? I mean, my dad passed away in 2009. So if you don't mind sharing the story of when you called did he even know?
Yeah, because he's also a shareholder.
Right.
And he does the math more on my stock than I do. So he probably knew faster than I did. But so I just had the conversation. I just said, did you ever expect to see anything like this or something like that? And it blew him away. Like, ironically, he kept on telling me, even when we just started the company and we became public and the stock was starting to do whatever it was going to do, he kept on saying, you need to sell some stock. You need to sell some stock. And I'm like, no, I'm not selling any stock. Why would I sell any stock? This is a company that I plan to build for the rest of my life. And so I never sold any stock, and that actually contributed to the fact that I actually was able to hit that billionaire status number, because if I would have sold half my stock, it would take a lot more work.
Somebody we both know tells me a story with half a smile on his face, and how he's got like a $2 million pool in his backyard in California. that really cost him like $300,000 because he sold the EXP stock, and the EXP stock went to $2 million. Now he should have held on to it. There are a lot of stories like that.
Oh yeah, Brian Colhane would be another one.
Yeah, I heard him talk about that.
Who has a couple $1 million pool in his backyard that he technically only paid like, $100,000 for.
Yeah. So moral of the story is, well, it's interesting. Billionaires, most first generation billionaires did it obviously exactly like you did, and most of their net worth is in the companies that they founded too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that like when Apple, Steve Jobs, like when he passed, supposedly he only owned 2 stocks. It was Apple and Pixar or whatever wherever Pixar went, or maybe it was Disney, but he only owned 2 stocks, and like he didn't like, and that's where all his net worth was. And so there's a lot of people that, why would you, if you're really good at what you do, why would you invest in other people's stuff when you could just invest in yourself?
Completely. This is the question I was looking forward to asking you, and this is something that I hear a lot, and people are sort of mumbling about it. And the essence of this question is, it's too late to join EXP, right? The train has left the station. And Julie and I did this research. In business school, we learned about the stages of product maturity, how a new product or model evolves. In the first phase is innovators. You remember this bell curve, basically. Innovators, early adopters, early majority, and late majority. The innovators would be up to EXP. I would imagine it was when you had up to maybe 1,000 agents, right? Those maybe not even that, maybe only 500, right? And then you had, but where do you think EXP is in that as far as the different phases?
Yeah. So one, keep in mind that real estate agents turnover. There's a lot of turnover in this industry. So you think about the fact that we've got 60,000. There's 1.5 million licensed realtors in the United States. A record
right now.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I think
actually 1.5 million members of NAR, but that doesn't include all licensed realtors in the United States, because not all of them join the National Association of Realtors.
Yeah, so I think in order to refer to yourself as a realtor, you have to be a member of NAR. So real estate agents and professionals is over 2 million. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard 2.3 actually, Glenn, recently.
Mm-hmm. So you got 2.3 million licensed individuals in the U.S. You've got another, couple 100,000 in Canada, or more, 200,000 or 300,000 in Canada. You've got worldwide, there's probably 20 million agents in some capacity around the world. So we're still really small. I mean, last year I just read a stat. EXP represented 2.7% of the real estate market in the United States. So 2.7%. So, let's say that we grow over the next, let's 5 years to whatever the number gets to, but maybe we get to somewhere close to 500,000 agents worldwide. Well, that means that we're just barely 10% of the way there. And I think that you start to think about 5 years from now, it's pretty easy to get to a 500,000 number. Might be a little aggressive, but probably not that aggressive. 50% year-over-year growth from where we're at now in 5 years is probably something like 484,000 people. And so maybe we get 250,000. Realgy has over 300,000 people associated with their brand. Keller Williams has 160, 170,000. Remax has, worldwide, 120,000 agents. So, for us to think about the size, and then think about the fact that even inside of those companies, how many people have turned over the years for them to retain that number of agents. Well, we're going to turn over a lot of agents, just like every other real estate brokerage. So, of the 60,000 agents, you start to go out, a few years from now, maybe 25,000 of them are still with EXP, and there's another 300,000 or whatever the number is that have joined us since, and there'll be a number of people that joined today that will be earning high 6, low 7-figure businesses just by helping EXP grow.
And the international growth with Michael Valdez, what he's been doing is extraordinary.
Oh yeah,
I've never. Have you ever experienced anything like that, Glenn? I mean, it's like every 2 weeks. We opened up this country, opened up that country, and I even look at our revenue share. We've got, it's India and Colombia, so much from Colombia, and Mexico, Spain. You see all this too. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's growing like you look at places like India. I mean, India has over 1 billion people in it, and like Mexico, we're being told already that probably going to be a professionalizing factor to the industry, the real estate industry in Mexico, because in Mexico there isn't really a standardized system for how real estate's
There's
done.
no license.
In a lot of Mexico, there's not licensed, and there, in almost all of Mexico, there's nothing like an MLS. Cabo has a bit of an MLS, but for the most part, there's no professional standards. And so if EXP starts to bring in and sort of provide some professional standards, it just improves the industry as well.
And the people, like the brokerages and the leaders in Mexico that EXP has attracted, I've met some of them through Orlando, Montiel. Well, amazing people.
Oh yeah.
Just not like it's incredible, and because they see the big opportunity. They see it's more than just a brokerage or a franchise. It's something pretty incredible. So I would say, maybe you'll agree, early adopters, maybe midway through the early adopter phase, maybe the beginning of the early adopter phase. We're certainly not done to early majority.
Well, we're definitely not early majority. I would say we're probably midway through early adopters. So
yeah, I agree. That's what it feels like. Well, you have these conversations in some of these markets. It's like, we're just driving through Boise, and there's less than 400 agents in Boise, and we have a little group of agents there that we met with, and they're like, there's only 400 agents here. And I'm like, good. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing, because it's not oversaturated. There's so much opportunity, and it's exciting.
400 EXP agents in Boise?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's so fun, Glenn, driving again all these beautiful parts and these little communities that Julie and I are able to blast through over 2 months in this trip and see EXP signs. I mean, that's really cool. Do you get a little kick out of that? You must.
I do, yeah. Like when I'd start to see signs around the country, and there's certain parts of the country. I mean, Boise 400 is pretty good amount of agents for a community, but like Charlotte, we're the number one real estate brokerage, and number of cities around the country, we're now the number one most dominant real estate brokerage in a lot of cities in America.
And people still try to say, well, EXP is just a recruiting model. Well, yes, just like everything else on planet Earth, if you actually want to grow your company. But then you look at the sheer numbers of units and volume in some of these major markets. We're a recruiting company, but guess what? We're also a company that's selling a majority of the real estate in some of these markets.
Well, you don't get any benefit from recruiting a non-productive agent.
100%. Let's talk about revenue share. So this is something, revenue share, equity in the company, and a lot of the other ideas that you had that inspired some of the rapid growth of the company. So revenue share has the potential to create many millionaires, multimillionaires, and beyond. And I heard a statistic recently, 60, 90 days ago, and again, if I'm getting my numbers wrong, forgive me, that you know what? I'm not going to ask you that. I'm going to stick with my question. I'm not going to tell you about my statistic because it might be something you won't want to answer. And it's about the company that offers profit share versus revenue share and the number of people that they've paid over $1 million in the history of the company. Do you know the question? You know what I'm talking about?
No, well, you can ask whatever, but but I don't know their stats.
I heard it was 6. A total of this other company whose name will remain nameless, right? That there's a total of 6 people total that have earned over $1 million in profit share ever in the company. And last year, I heard a statistic, Dave, that $150 million was paid in revenue share to EXP agents last year. Was it last year or was it more than a year?
I don't track the numbers, so I don't know how much we've paid out in revenue share, but we pay out quite a bit. I mean, you think about the fact that we're doing, whatever we've done in the last year, $2 billion in commissions, generally speaking, that have been generated. And you start to think about, okay, well, if 8% of that is paid out in revenue share, that's about 150, 160 million.
There you go.
Yeah.
So did you think that revenue share and did you see it as the, again, I've had this conversation with people, and it's sometimes the numbers are too big for people to comprehend. It makes them uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But did you comprehend when you were coming up with this idea that there would be this many agents that were frankly becoming millionaires and multimillionaires from revenue share? Did you originally have that vision?
So on paper, I knew what the numbers suggested, but I didn't. So there's, you've heard of a SWAG, right? Mm-hmm. You know what it stands for?
Strengths, weaknesses. I forget the A and the G.
That's SWOT.
Oh, SWOT.
SWOT. So SWAG is when you sort of put a business plan together, and you take a SWAG, which is what the financial is going to be. So a SWAG stands for scientific wild ass guess.
Oh, copy.
Yeah. So the idea was, on paper, we're going, this thing looks like it's got potential. Bottom line is, I built the model because if I would have found a company that had this model, I would have been working there as an agent. I wouldn't have started the company. that really fundamentally came down to the reason why the model exists the way it was, because it didn't exist and I wanted it for me as an agent. And quite frankly, I think that agents that join EXP that have that sort of true entrepreneur mindset, truly are good at their craft, or truly a student of the business, they can't help but be successful in the EXP model. And it's such a great place to build your business when you know that at the end of the day, in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, say it takes 10 years time to build, that residual lifestyle, that you now can in fact retire if you choose to, without any repercussions around that retirement event. And that, again, that just didn't exist. So for me, I was like, there's a lot of people who are wired like me that are out there in the marketplace who are looking for this type of company. And so, and I knew that those people also knew other people like that as well. So I did think that it had the potential, but I didn't think we were going to be at this level by this point in time. If you would have asked me in 2009 where I thought we would be in 2021, I might have said 10,000 agents, like in 2009. 2012, we said 10,000 agents by 2020, but now now you start to go out, we're going to be at 2030. I have no clue, but it's going to be a lot.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating though. The business outgrew your vision of how fast it would grow. I don't think I've ever had anyone that honestly would. Have you ever read anybody actually, someone in your position actually saying what you just said? I mean, that's just pure humility right there. What most people would have said, I always thought this is what it's going to be, and it's exactly how and you're just being completely transparent and saying that it's the idea, the original idea was so appealing and outpaced even your expectation of how appealing it would become. That's amazing.
Well, I'd started so many businesses in the past that all had great concepts, at least in my mind, that I thought they had potential. And there were a few that I was like counting my chickens away before the eggs hatched, and they failed miserably. So but all you can do is you build a business model, you try to get it going, you try to create the momentum, and there's a certain amount of momentum that you have to get. And it's called launch velocity. Well, we just had, both Elon Musk, or not Elon Musk, but we had Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson go to space in the last couple of weeks. But there's a thing called launch velocity. And launch velocity is basically the speed at which a spacecraft has to get to in order to actually get out of Earth's orbit. Now, in the case of Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, they actually didn't leave the gravitational pull because they came back down, but they made it to the edge of space, and sort of that was where they. But if you actually want to go through that, and you want to break out, I think you have to go like something like 7,000 miles an hour.
They got up to I think 1,400 miles per hour or 1,200 miles per hour. I think that's how fast Bezos was then immediately reversed to start going back. Okay. Something like that. Yeah, so that makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah, so but if you think about from a business perspective, there's got to be the right set of ingredients in place in order for a company to reach launch velocity. And the problem with most companies is that the owners or the architects of those companies think more about their bottom line than the value they're providing to their customer or to their constituency, in our case, agents. And if they just flip that on its head and said, how can I add more value to agents than they can get anywhere else in this marketplace, assuming that they didn't go bankrupt doing it, that's the way to make true wealth for the people that are in the field. But then by extension, that sort of creates the value or the legacy value for the true entrepreneur. And so I don't understand why we were the first ones to be able to do this. I mean, I sort of do, but at some level I'm like going, because we were the first, so many agents can just tap into it, take advantage of it, and just run with it.
Well, it's the revenue share, it's the stock, it's how you've got things vested over 3 years. All the stuff is just like, I don't know if you had that, all these, how it is now originally in your idea, or it just evolved to it, but it does really, it is elegant. I mean, when you're talking to an agent, and even if you're comparing EXP to anything else in the marketplace, if they just take the time to set their skepticism aside or their natural fear of making a mistake, and they compare apples to oranges, it sells itself.
Right.
It just does. It sells itself. And now at this point in the companies, and we're just, in the early we're, basically early adopter stage. But you're looking at so much confirmation. So many people out there who have stories to tell of moving to EXP and being successful. And even if they're making enough revenue share to cover their house payment and they've got some stock in the company that they never thought, equity, they finally have savings. These are the miracles, I think, personally, for the industry. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, the number of people that have reached out to me that said that they never knew how they were going to send their kids to school, or how they were going to buy a house, or do like so many different life events that EXP has powered. It's pretty darn special. Like that is, and I'm sure you get messages from people in your people's lives you've touched, where they're reaching out and going, I just did this, I can't believe it.
I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know if you've had this, but everyone was like all hyped up when when you were splitting the stock, and I had many calls with people who'd never actually logged on to see how much stock they had. Mm-hmm. Did you have any calls like that?
Oh yeah, well, I had many. Well, I didn't have calls, but I definitely got messages from people.
Yeah, I get texts, and so that is funny, right? Mm-hmm. Well, here's how you do it. And I created a little video and I sent it to them. It's 3 or 4 clicks, and you can see what your equity is, and that was funny. I have to say, a whole week or 2 weeks where people are just so bouncing off the walls. That's a good experience to have.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many people that were sitting there going, their value of EXP stock that they got for free was worth more than all of the stocks that they had bought for the last 10 years. Now, they might not have invested that much, but the value of their equity in EXP had far exceeded any of their other investments.
Yeah, but Glenn, this goes back to what I said earlier. It's the reason, I think it's amazing, right? Mm-hmm. You're not just, agents are obviously their immediate lives, but you're changing generations of agents' lives if they take advantage of the opportunity that you created.
Right.
It really is something that's transformative for just potentially millions of people all over the world if they just open their minds to realizing what opportunity there is within EXP. That's something, I say this to people, and I'm 51, right? This is probably the last best business opportunity of our lives. Not the last business opportunity, but the last best business opportunity. Not for you necessarily, but I'm just saying in general, the people I speak with, that really resonates with them.
Yeah, well, I think it is for me too, quite frankly. I mean, I've looked at, what, I do the what ifs. What if I, exited, and there's not a single thing I can think of that's is more rewarding, it touches more people's lives, and has more business upside than just building EXP.
100%. I mean, 100%. So, last couple of questions. I really appreciate your patience answering all these, by the way. This is a funny question. So you have a birthday coming up. You're a billionaire, and by definition, you're hard to shop for, is a Julie question. What would be the perfect gift for you? That's
perfect gift for me. I don't know.
No more questions.
Find a nice show on Netflix and just have a little dinner at home or something like that.
Classic introvert answer. I appreciate that. So what question should I have asked you that I didn't? What would be a question that you would have, or something you would have liked to have talked about, maybe where your mind's...
Yeah. Can't think of them. You asked all the good questions.
I skipped the easy questions. We had a lot of easy ones. I wanted to make this something that people could listen to, where they could really relate and appreciate it. And I think we did a great job.
Yep.
I think we did. I think we can call this a podcast.
Okay. Awesome. Good stuff.
Great. So listeners, there you go. We really appreciate you listening today. This was an interview that, frankly, I've been trying to get with Glenn for a long time, but I did not want to do it on a Zoom. And that's the reason I never actually followed through on the Zoom that you had agreed to previously. I wanted to do it in person because I wanted this to be archival for you, but also for Julie and I, because this is something really special to me and something I was really looking forward to. So I appreciate it sincerely.
Awesome. Thanks.
So listeners, you have a fantastic day, and we'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows. And until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.